Hey, Maya, how's it going?
What up, Neds? How we doing? How we doing?
It seems like we haven't talked. The thing is, reality is we talk every day, but this
That
is
is
the
this
first
is
time.
true.
This is the first time in like a month and a half that we've actually recorded, so kind of
We're
fun.
back at it. Back at
Sorry
it.
we've been gone, but we're back.
Thank you for being patient with us. I know that we had just kickstarted our podcast and we're getting into a groove, but sometimes
Life
life
happens,
happens.
and that's totally fine. But if this is your first time with us, hello. Welcome to this podcast where a current and an ex student athlete sit down and have real discussions with other student athletes and ask the questions that nobody really asks. My name is Ariana Fernandez.
And I'm Maya Falcon. And for the first time in about a month, roll the intro music. All right.
So you've probably been wondering, where have you guys been? Again, things happen, and we had to focus on school, we had to focus on our lives as students, and that was the most important. Me personally, I am an athlete as well, and it's been a tough month. But this is kind of what I wanted to address. If wherever you are in the world right now, COVID is a real thing. Whether you want to accept it or not, it's a real thing, and you have to be mindful of how others have handled it, how others have lived through it. Just because COVID has not affected you personally or your family, it does not mean that it hasn't affected other people. Everyone has been affected by COVID. Maybe not physically, maybe your health hasn't been affected by COVID, but mentally, this has affected everyone. And everyone is taking it and handling it in a different way. So, if there's anything that I can stress, please be respectful and cautious and aware of how people, you know, have handled it. Because again, just because you haven't gone through it doesn't mean that someone else hasn't or their family hasn't. This is a real thing, and it breaks my heart to see the world suffer, truthfully, honestly. And again, if there's anything that I can stress, please just be respectful. And if you can, hug your family members and hug your friends close if you can. I know it's hard now, but just you never know what can happen.
I think it's important that every day we take a step back to realize what we have and everything, but especially now, especially a year into a global pandemic, with the vaccine rollout where we are anyways, like we're pretty lucky. It's starting to come along, but that doesn't mean that everything that we've done so far is just automatically gone and doesn't exist. We still have to take the proper precautions and be safe, not only to protect yourself, but your family and friends and just other people as well. So, and always, just always, even whether we're in a pandemic or not, you never know what someone's going through or what they've been through or what is going on. Nothing is ever as it seems.
Mhm.
So just try and be considerate, be kind, reach out to others for their sake, but also for your sake. Like we all need each other at this time, and this is not something we're
Exactly.
going to get through alone. We
Mhm.
have to, yeah, we have to be in it together, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
It's
And
there.
with
It's just it's still a little bit away, but it is there. Again, like it's hard because we've been doing this for a year,
yeah,
you'd think that some people have been able to not adapt, but I would say some people would, kind of learn like, hey, maybe people I think it's hard definitely because some people may not have been again affected by COVID personally, like maybe you haven't gotten COVID, but maybe your friend has or your friend's family member has. And it really does. You never know until you're in their shoes. So it's one of those things that you just have to be, again, I'm going to repeat myself, but I feel like I need to say it. You have to be respectful. And we're not
go
doing
off,
this.
sis.
The thing about COVID and this pandemic is that we're not doing it alone. We're all going through this together in some way or another. We're all going through it together. So know that you're not alone. I'm sure your friends are feeling some type of way about it too. Because at the end of the day, COVID is really tough.
It is. Whether you have it or not, like just the
Exactly.
situation is tough,
Mhm. And it's frustrating. And you have every right to feel the way you're feeling about this pandemic. But again, at the end of the day, you're not doing it alone. There are so many other people out there who are probably struggling just as much as you. So again, be cautious, be respectful, be aware, and it's okay.
Be gentle with yourself, be gentle with others. And I
Mm.
think going back to stepping back and being thankful for what we have, it's a good time to also check your priorities.
Yes.
Like what's important, what's really important, what's
Hmm.
really necessary. You know what I'm saying? And I
Exactly.
think it's just a time for reflection for all of us, and
Yeah, for sure. And I think also kind of on top of that, checking your priorities, checking who is your priority, but also this is a great time to reflect on what you're grateful for. You can be obviously grateful for so many things. If you sit down and write or think about what you're grateful for, I can guarantee you there are so many things in your life that you can be grateful for. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're automatically happy, and that's totally fine. You can be grateful for a lot of things, but you can still feel unhappy, but it's recognizing that, right? So,
yeah.
um, again,
Gratitude is a practice. It's a
exactly.
practice, like you actually have to practice it. You can say you're, grateful for all these things, but you genuinely have to
Mhm.
practice and adapt it into your everyday life,
Mhm. And it's
and
not
it is hard.
it is for sure. And it's not one of those things that you can just sit down one day, be like, okay, I'm grateful for this. And then the next day, forget about it. No, again, you have to practice it. You have to, it's, it is one of those things that if you do that daily, what am I grateful for? At least one thing or two things or even three, you got to think about it.
Like you're able to just recognize the little and appreciate the little things,
Yes,
which goes a
exactly.
long way. Goes a
Hmm.
long way.
For sure.
All right, Nance, quick time. What's one thing you're grateful for?
This past month has really taught me that I'm grateful for a lot of things. And despite being in a pandemic, I am grateful for a lot in my life. You are one of them, obviously. I would not be where I am today without you.
Nance.
Very, very grateful for my family, for my friends, and for the sport that I'm still in. There are things that have obviously come and gone with my sport, but at the end of the day, I am grateful for the things and the people that bring me joy. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying that those people make me happy. Sometimes they make me angry, I'll be honest. But at the end of the day, I am truthfully and this year in general, I have been really grateful for my friends. There have been, people who have come into my life, people who have gone from my life, but right now currently I am so grateful for the people that I have in my life
Yeah.
because they're amazing, truthfully and
Yeah.
honestly, and they make me so happy. And I truthfully, it makes me love life a little bit more even in this shitty circumstance, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? I just want to say I love my family very much. I know I've already said it. And quick shout out to Mamu. I love you with my whole heart. Mamu, I love you with all of my heart. I just thought I'd say that. I know, hopefully she's listening. But if she's
And
not,
she most definitely is.
if she's not listening, that's so awkward for me. Mamu is my grandma for those of you who don't know, but I love you very, very much. I love you, love you, love you very, very much. I can't say it enough. Family has always and forever will be a priority for me, and I love my family to death.
Yeah.
Let me flip it around. What are you grateful for?
So much, like
Mhm.
I think we all complain. We all,
Yeah, and
think
natural.
negatively
That's
sometimes,
natural. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I probably just got to double time what you said, but if I, like I'm most certainly grateful I have amazing people in my life, you included. But I think something else that I'm very grateful for, especially as a woman in this world, is an education.
Yes.
An
Yes.
education, because that is not something that is easy to come by for a lot of other women in the world.
That is a good one.
And,
Very good
you
point.
know, that's definitely something that, I definitely do. I complain about school? Of course. Sometimes school gets on my nerves, but when it gets to that point, I try and step back and think like, okay, this is taking me somewhere and this is going to do something for me. Not everyone gets this, so I need to embrace it.
Yeah. And it's important that I'm glad that you can recognize that. Some people can't.
Yeah, I know.
But I'm so glad that you're able to.
One more though that I always say when it comes up is clean drinking water,
Yes.
because
Yes.
that in
People take
itself
that.
as
That is
well.
something that people take for granted.
100%.
Mhm.
And if you follow me on Instagram, which like you should, it's a party most of the time. You know what
Party.
I'm saying? Party. A few months ago was World Water Day, and it's just a day to recognize that not everyone has access to clean drinking water, and how water is becoming a very popular and expensive commodity
Mhm.
when water is absolutely necessary to survive. And to me, selling water is like selling oxygen to breathe.
Mhm.
So if you have access to clean drinking water, just that, like, you use water
Recognize
for
it. Yeah.
everything. You use
Mhm.
it to bathe, you use it to cook, drink, clean, everything.
Mhm.
So that's definitely two things that I always mention when people ask me what I'm grateful for, is definitely those two things for sure.
Love that. I love that. Very in depth. Now that we've kind of gone through, where we've been, disclaimers, whatnot, let's dive into our actual topic for today. By the way, I don't think I've mentioned it. I don't think we've mentioned it yet. It's just Maya and I today. We thought for our first
Hello.
episode.
Sorry.
We thought for our first episode back, we just kind of sit down and kind of bring it back to how we started the podcast, just us two.
Yeah,
But our
man.
topic for today is the fear of failure. Now,
Whew, she's a hefty one.
it is a hefty one. If I'm honest, if we're being honest, we've actually filmed this episode before, but there's just a lot to talk about when it comes to the fear of failure. And being both of us being athletes, we have so much to talk about fearing failure. I'm sure any athlete can kind of go through their own experience and talk about times where they didn't want to fail or they were scared of failing. So when we filmed it originally, it was it was hard to
All over
just
the place. It was
it was all
everywhere.
yeah, it was hard because like we want to talk about point A, point B, point C, and then we realized okay, we got to kind of narrow it down. So, um the main thing that we wanted to focus on is how we fear failure, why we fear failure, and then we're just gonna kind of gonna talk about how we feared failure in currently, in our sport, in our life, so on and so forth. So
I,
let's get into it, shall we?
yeah, I think too, like, fear of failure isn't just even applied to just athletes, you know?
Yeah.
Like, even if you don't really partake in extracurriculars and you're just a student, I know you've gone into a test before thinking like, I'm gonna fail or I'm scared, you know? Which is completely fine because obviously it's the unknown and you're scared of it, but why do we automatically fear the failure instead of the excitement to succeed?
Mhm. I
Because we've
think
prepared for this and everything like that, right?
yeah, and I think one thing with so starting off, what is failure? I think in general, when you're faced with a challenge in life, you see it as a threat. And this can go for sports, for life, anything, job, career, anything, literally anything. You're faced with a challenge and you think of it as a threat. You don't think of it as a challenge. You think of it as something that can inhibit your abilities, right? I think the fear of failure is the fear of the consequences that come with failure. So, in the context of swimming, let me put it that way. If I think about swimming, let's say you're in a race, you're doing a race, the fear of failure is fearing the consequences of you either losing that race, not going a best time. You know what I mean? From an athlete's point of view, when you're in competition, obviously you set these goals and expectations for yourself. And when you don't meet them, it's really frustrating. And then you're going to automatically assume that it's failure, which it can be. But at the end of the day, you can't succeed without failure. They go hand in hand, whether you want to believe it or not. In order to succeed, you have to fail because you can't just be riding on this high for your entire life. How are you going to appreciate the highs when you can't experience the lows? You know what I mean?
Yes, exactly. And I think failure is part of success. Like
Yes,
you just said, you
exactly.
can't really succeed without failure, but
Hmm.
that just means that failure is part of that equation to success. And it's not really about how you fail or what happened when you did. It's about how you get back up from it. And it sounds so cheesy and cliche because you hear so many people say it, but cliches become cliches because there's a sense of real truth, and it's just the simplest way to say it. It's not about how you get knocked down, but how you get back
Get
up
back up. Exactly.
and keep going, right?
Hmm.
So I think too, for me, failure is, or not even just for me, I think for people in general, we also, while we're our, probably our hardest critique and everything like that,
Yeah,
critic,
for sure.
whatever,
Hmm.
I think we also fear what other people are going to think.
Yes,
because
100%.
it's so important in today's society what other people think of you and everything like that, which is
Yes.
completely
Whether
normal.
you also whether you want to admit it or not,
Yeah.
everyone cares about what other people think, like
To some degree.
exactly.
Exactly.
And like let's put it this way. If you do something and you're like let's say you do something bad. I'm not going to say specifically what you did. Let's say you did something bad. You're going to think I at least for me, if I do something bad, I think, well, what are my friends going to think of me? And sometimes like even doing this podcast too, like maybe one day we're going to talk about a topic and I'm like, well, what are some people going to think about it? And that's so
Yeah.
natural. We're so accustomed to living our lives sometimes in fear of what others will say, and at some point you're just gonna have to let that go. I know it's
Yeah.
hard. I know it is hard. It's something you
It's a
have to
process for
It is
sure.
a process, and you have to learn about it too. You have to learn, and that teaches you a lot about yourself as well. But it is something that you're gonna have to let go, and you're gonna have to say, I don't care what other people think. It's
Yeah.
hard to do, but I think it's really important in order to get past that barrier of fearing failure.
Yeah, 100%. It's very, it's a process,
Yes,
you know.
exactly.
And I think a lot of us need to, even myself included, like I said before, like instead of fearing failure, let's be excited about succeeding, about learning. Maybe the whatever you're doing doesn't go the way you planned, but I know that you're going to learn something from it.
Yeah.
Something's going to come out of it,
And I
and you
think
just got
that's
to use that as
yes,
fuel.
exactly. I think that's really important. That's a really good point. I think that you can learn so much from success. I think that you can learn even more from failure
Yes.
because I kind of mentioned it before, but how are you going to appreciate the highs when you can't experience the lows? I
Yeah.
think if I think about my own personal life, both athletic and non-athletic life, um, the things that I have experienced uh, that I would define as failures have taught me more than what success has taught me.
Yeah.
Getting knocked down, I would say air quotes around knocked down, but being able to experience failure in my personal life has taught me so much, not only about myself, but it has taught me resilience. It has taught me how to face adversity, and it's made me the person I am today.
Yeah, and so many people have different definitions of failure, right?
Yeah.
We each individually have our own definition depending on the situation. Then there's like the actual definition of failure, whatever.
Hmm.
But I think it's important to, when you are reflecting on something that you've done that maybe you see as a failure, maybe flip it around. See things that maybe that you did succeed in, and instead of calling it a failure, things that you can work on. And be gentle with yourself. Nobody is perfect, me included, Ariana included, everybody included. And when it comes to other people and their successes, if you don't have anything nice to say, just don't say it.
Yeah, exactly.
And obviously there are certain situations where you can give constructive feedback, and there's a difference between criticizing constructive feedback and just being straight up mean,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
So just, be gentle with yourself, be gentle with others.
Mhm.
If you wouldn't say it to someone else, don't say it to yourself. If you wouldn't say it to yourself, don't say it to someone else.
Exactly. Likewise, other people's success does not mean it's your failure. And
Yes.
that is, I think, especially now, people have to realize that. Because just because someone else is out there doing their thing, succeeding again in air quotes, what is the definition of success? We'll kind of get into
Yeah.
that later. But just because other people are succeeding, it doesn't mean that you're failing. It just
Yeah.
means that you haven't gotten to a point where you want to get to yet. Yet is
It's
the
your
key word.
journey.
Exactly. Your journey is not the same as someone else's. And it's
Yeah.
really hard because we live in a world where we compare absolutely everything. Let's
Yeah.
talk about swimming for a second. In the sport of swimming, it's very hard because you're in a sport where you're literally comparing your times to someone else's,
Yeah.
like to people around the world. So, how are you going to kind of get out of that kind of zone of comparing yourself? How do you stop comparing yourself? It's really hard to do, but
It is.
I think one thing you have to think about um, when you're talking about failure, what is the definition of a failure? Vice versa, what is the definition of success? Everyone has a different definition. because we define failure differently. Everyone does.
Yeah,
I also think that society as a whole defines failure as something, and we kind of feed into that idea. For
of
example,
course.
like if you're not, some people think this is like, personally, I believe this is a standard idea. I don't believe in it, but I think society has kind of constructed this view that if you're not going to college by a certain age, or if you're not going to college, period, you're not
Yeah.
successful. And that is not true at all. Again, I'm going to go back to this idea that everyone has a different journey. People who are quote unquote successful haven't had the same standard journey as what school has necessarily taught us. I
Yeah.
think. I think again, everyone has their own path, and you just have to you personally have to figure out what you want to do in your own life, because at the end of the day, it's no one else's life but your own. It's
Yeah.
you and your body and you in your mind, and you have to find out what makes you happy and what makes you successful. It's up to you, I think.
Yeah. And like we've been saying, it's a whole journey, right? As an athlete, too, you have to learn with how to cope with that fear. So, from the swimming perspective, you're behind the blocks getting ready for a race. How are you going to cope with those maybe negative thoughts that start to creep in, the self doubt, that fear of failure? Or if you're a soccer player or a hockey player or anything before a game, or for me, when I played soccer, I remember like before a penalty shot, if I was given that role, or, it was at the end of the game and it's on me to score this goal,
Mm-hmm.
those thoughts of self-doubt start to creep in, because you have a whole team riding on you. You want to make them proud, you want to make yourself proud, but
Yeah.
it's you gotta change our thinking, you
Mm-hmm.
know and I'm not gonna lie, straight up, I'm a culprit of negative thinking and negative self-talk.
Aren't we
Oh,
all?
yeah,
You
and
and me both,
like I
sister. My gosh.
yeah,
Oh my
you
god.
know but I think it's important that, we try and flip that as much as you can,
Mhm.
don't reject the thought, acknowledge that you had it, but then change it. So instead of being like, oh, I completely sucked that race, maybe you could say, this wasn't the greatest, but I'm going to go back to training, fix it, work on it, and then hopefully the next race, next game, whatever, it'll be better.
And I'll be honest, I'm not going to sit here and be like, think positively. I know I think negatively, like 8 out of 10 times. Okay.
Yeah.
Like I just, and it's something I'm working on, and I completely admit it. I am completely aware of it. It is something you have to work on. I think, especially when you're hard on yourself, it's so easy to just think negatively and only think negatively about yourself. But in
Hmm.
reality, that's not the truth. If you We're going to use that example again. Like if you have a race and let's say it didn't go the way that you wanted it to, it doesn't mean that it was a bad race completely. I'm sure there were things that you did in the race that were positive. However, maybe there are more negatives, and that's totally okay. Maybe it probably wasn't even your last race. So the best part about something like swimming is that you do the same race pretty much over and over again. And
Yeah.
you don't realize it,
With
but
any sport,
yeah, exactly. You
it's
play
kind of
the
you
game
go through
of
the motions.
basketball. Okay, let's talk about that. You play at the end of the day, it's the game. You're playing this like NBA players. They go day in and day out playing a game. The same rules, same maybe not the same kind of layout. Maybe it doesn't go the same way as game A did than game B did, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, there are positives to take from negatives if that makes sense.
And you can do it.
You
Whatever you're
can do
pondering
it.
in your head, you can do it.
You
So
can do
go
it.
out and do it. And I promise you, starting is the hardest part. For me, anyways. Starting is the hardest part. Being nervous is normal. You're human. You can have that fear, but just know you can do it, you
Exactly.
know?
And guess what? The best part is you've already done the work.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that everyone forgets. Not only in sports, but in life too. You've done the work. And you just have to go out there and do it. And
Yeah.
it's scary to think about, obviously, but you've put in the time, you've put in the effort, you've put in the blood, sweat, the tears, everything in between. You just have to go out there, and it takes a little belief in yourself too. That is also
Yeah.
something you have to practice, I think. But to get over that fear of failure, to diminish that shadow of failure, you have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in your abilities, because you can have as many people believing in you as possible, your friends, your family, your coaches, everyone. They can all believe in you. But if you don't believe in yourself, you're not going to be able to succeed the way you want to succeed.
Hmm.
And
You won't ever be happy or satisfied with yourself,
exactly.
you
Exactly.
know?
Which is a horrible place to be in. If you're
Yeah.
never satisfied with yourself, because you never, like, that is so sad to think about. There are, it breaks my heart. There are people out there who just really genuinely feel like they're failures in life, and I can promise you that's not true. Maybe you haven't succeeded the way that you want to succeed. Maybe you got to take a step back and be like, okay, let me look at everything for a second. Take a
Yeah,
deep breath.
exactly.
Look at everything.
If you point out a bad thing or like a negative thing, maybe counterbalance it with a positive or two positive things,
Hmm.
or a way that in which you can fix or work on that negative thing that you're pointing out,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Hmm.
But when it comes to failure, especially as an athlete, Ariana, this is really for you, I think. I'm going to ask you this question.
Alrighty.
When you're nervous about something, whether it be swimming, school, is it that you're scared, or do you feel unprepared
Uh,
for
that's
whatever's in front of you?
that's a really good question. I think more often than not, you're just scared. I don't think I truth unless you really haven't, like, if you're a swimmer, like, in let's say you are a swimmer and you go to practice, but you're physically there, but you're mentally not there. Sometimes it happens, I get that. But let's say you go to practice and you don't really put in the work. Then yeah, maybe you are unprepared. But more times than not, you're actually just scared. And I completely get that. I've been in that same position where I have just been flat out just scared because I'm afraid of what may happen. No one wants to fail. No one wants to experience that because it is hard. It is hard to go through something that like, you don't succeed the way you want to. It is hard to go through that, but you have to, unfortunately. I think personally, one time that I've kind of felt this was, so I go to Florida State. I'm on the swim team at FSU. And last year was my first year competing for FSU. And I remember this so clearly because it reminds me of growth, and I've grown a lot since then. But there was one dual meet that I had that we weren't winning at that time. And it wasn't like my race. It was up to me to fix the score or anything. But I was just completely and utterly, like, engulfed by the fear of failure. I was so afraid of letting my team down, letting myself down, that I just shut down internally. I got up on the blocks for 100 fly, and when I dove in, my goggles fell to my chin. And that's like the last thing you want as a swimmer, for your goggles to fricking fall off. But they fell off my chin in a college dual meet. And I, like, as I was surfacing to the water, I remember putting them back on my face. And I was like hyperventilating the whole race. In reality, if I look back on it now, it wasn't actually that bad of a race. I came second. And even
Girl.
though my goggles fell off, but in my mind, I was like, everyone is going to hate me for this. I wanted to succeed. I wanted to do this for my team and myself and my coaches. And personally, I just felt like I failed everyone. And I probably wasn't the best idea, but right after my race, I ran to the bathroom and I just let it all out. Like, I was hyperventilating, I was crying, whatnot. But in reality, it wasn't. I was just scared. I was so scared of failing that it got to me, and it affected my performance,
Yeah.
which sucks, obviously. We did lose a dual meet, but
But
I
that's
will
okay.
say, yeah, exactly. It's okay. You're gonna lose, and that's
Yeah.
fine. Like, it's not the end
You
of the world. It's not. It wasn't the end of the world at that moment. It definitely felt like the end of the world when you don't achieve the things that you want to achieve. When you let other people down, when you think that you've let other people down, it gets to you. It'll get to you.
Mhm.
So we've kind of talked about fearing failure, obviously. But we're gonna try and flip it around. Maybe you haven't thought about it like this. Can you fear success? One of my favorite quotes of all time is by Audrey Hepburn. If you don't know her, she's an actress, one of the best, one of the just best in her era, I think. That's a whole other topic.
Iconic is what the kids are
Icon.
saying,
She's an icon.
right?
She's a legend. Love her. Anyway, one of my favorite quotes is by her, and it's success is very much in the eyes of the observer. And I think that also it's kind of like beauty is in the eye of the beholder, you know? It goes back to what we talked about society defining success and defining failure. Success can be viewed differently by everyone. You know, like I'm
It is
sure
viewed differently by everybody.
exactly it is. I can guarantee you that Maya and I look at success very differently because we both have different lives. You know, like we both
Yeah.
live and lead a different life. So her version of success may not be my version of success, which isn't a bad thing. It's just we again
It's not at all.
exactly it comes back to that idea of we all have values and we have expectations for ourselves and we set goals for ourselves, right? And achieving success can also be achieving those goals, achieving those expectations, getting past a barrier. And at the end of the day, again, I'm going to kind of flip back to what we talked about earlier. Your path is not someone else's. Everyone has a different path. Everyone has a different life.
You know, if your friend accomplished the same thing as you, like for me anyways, like I find like if I accomplish the same thing as someone else, sometimes I deem that as a failure because I wanted more.
Yeah.
But like I would never go up to them and be like, oh, you fucking failed kind of thing.
Exactly. If you wouldn't say it to a friend, why would you say it to yourself? Vice versa.
Yeah.
You know? I think you can fear success though. I think you can be afraid of what success comes with. The same way that you can fear what failure comes with. I think that some people can be afraid to succeed because they don't know again the consequences that come with it. And that's different for everyone. There are different consequences that come with failure and there are different consequences that come with success, but again, everything that you live through in life is a learning experience. You can't just go through life being afraid of everything because you won't learn, you won't grow. And that's so important. Not even growth physically, growth mentally, emotionally. Um, you know, you have to experience those things. It's a part of life.
100%. I think too, like personally, when it comes to, you know, I talked about fear, we've been talking about fear of failure, but when it comes to fear of success now, I think too, for me, it's been, you know, whatever I do is usually never good enough for me. I'm pretty sure I've said it every podcast. Like you yourself are going to be your hardest critic.
Yeah.
And you need to learn to be gentle with yourself, be realistic, be ambitious, but be realistic.
Yes.
You know,
that
be
is
proud
so
of yourself.
important. Yes.
You know, be proud of yourself. Embrace what you've done. Embrace what you haven't done. Embrace what you haven't done but are going to do.
What you have yet to do. Exactly.
What you have yet to do. Exactly. And yes, success is very much in the eye of the beholder. And that is you.
Yeah.
So define success as something, find what your definition of success is.
Yes.
Go with it. Be proud of it. And, you know, go along with the journey that you're on. It's not going to be easy. You know, you'll ask yourself why you're here sometimes not doing the best that you'd like, but that's just part of your journey. It just is. And embrace that because success is in the eye of the beholder, which is you.
Exactly.
You know,
I think, can you imagine if all that you experienced in life was success? No offense, but that's kind of boring. Yeah, exactly. Like the most interesting parts of my life personally were either when I messed up, failed, maybe things didn't go the way I wanted.
So much sweeter.
Exactly.
It makes it so much sweeter. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of like philosophical, I feel like. But truthfully, if you just sit back and think, nothing can be good without having bad or less good. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like there's always that room for improvement. It makes no sense, but it makes sense to me. And I know someone listening, it makes sense to you too.
Yeah, exactly.
To you, you know? Like nothing, it can't be good if there isn't something else
Yes.
for you to learn and
It's
grow from.
weighing it out, you know? You can't have
Exactly.
too much good, you can't have too much bad, vice versa.
What a good comeback episode this was. We're doing pretty good. We're doing well.
Hopefully
Still have it. Still got it.
we still got it.
And we're
A month and a
learning
half
still, you know.
later. I think if this seems like it's all over the place to you, no offense, but
It
I don't
is.
care because it makes sense to me.
Yeah, but real shit, you know. Sorry, vulgar, but real shit. It is because, you know, that's what the journey is. It's all over the place.
Life is all over the
very
place. It's not linear.
symbolic.
All right. Mm-hmm.
It's symbolic. So if there's anything to take away from this episode, is the symbolism.
Eh? No offense, but eh?
I'm keeping that in. But you know what I'm saying? You know how it is, man. You know.
No, I don't. I actually, can you elaborate on that? No, genuinely, can you elaborate on that?
Well,
What do you mean?
like we've talked about so much. Like we started talking about COVID, then we started talking about fear of failure, fear of success, all this stuff. And is there a structure to this podcast? Yeah, we tried to give it one. Did it really paint out exactly how we, you know, thought it was going to? No, but the idea is like, it's kind of cheesy, but it's symbolic of the way life is.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, life never really goes as planned. Maybe you'll reach that final destination that you had always planned on getting to, but your journey there, which is what the whole thing is about and what you need to embrace, never goes as planned. Kind of like this podcast did, this podcast episode today.
Life in general. Look at life right now. You cannot tell me that your life has panned out the way it is supposed to, especially given COVID. No one's life is how they expected it to be right now. No one expected. Personally, I did not expect to be living at home during my 3rd year of college in the States. I'm in Canada for my 3rd year of college in the States. Carry the one, that shouldn't add up. But that's how my life has panned out. I've made decisions, I've made choices that have led me to where I am currently right now, sitting here talking to you. And that's just how it goes.
I truthfully believe that we are all exactly where we are supposed to be, whether it went according to plan or not. We're all where we're supposed to be.
In that,
And as hard as that can be to accept and, you know, deal with, I think it's just important that we just be one with the moment. Be one with yourself, what's around you, and
be present.
Embrace it. Be present, yes.
I know sometimes it's really hard, especially when things aren't going your way. I completely get that. It is very hard to be present, but you know, channel that, feel what you're feeling. I think that's really important too. Especially when you're talking about failure too, you're allowed to feel frustrated. You're allowed to be upset with yourself. But again, how do you get back up from that? You know, it's not just because things don't go your way, it doesn't mean that it's the end of the world, because it's not. It's really not. You just have to believe that it can only get better from here. You know,
and it will. You just got hang in there. You can do it. I promise.
But I completely get that, especially with COVID too. I know I'm trying to think of how I'm trying to make it relevant with COVID. It's very hard to be present because everyone, not just you, everyone wants to get past this. It's so frustrating to live in a world where you can't go over and hug the person that you love, that you want to be with, you know, like it's really hard. But again, be present, understand that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Believe that. You have to believe it because there is a light at the end of the tunnel, you know?
We'll get there together. You know what I'm saying?
This is very simple, but if you are afraid of failure, if you're afraid of success, whatever it is, talk through it. You can talk through it, whether it's with a friend, a family member, a therapist, a psychologist, anyone.
Yourself.
Talk. You know what? I don't care who thinks I'm crazy, whatever. I don't care. Sometimes if I don't want to talk to anyone about it, maybe this will help you. I don't know. So there are 2 things that I do. One, I either write it down and burn it. Like everything that's frustrating me, everything that's making me angry, I write it down. Everything that comes to mind, I write it down and I burn it, or I throw it out.
Safely.
Yes, exactly. Okay, I'm not psycho.
No arson on here. No thanks.
Okay, well, duh. But no, you know what I mean? Like it's about getting rid of that, like writing it down and then kind of, you know, demolishing it. The other thing that I do, if there's something that I want to get off my chest, but I just can't, or I don't know how to, I turn on my camera and I record myself. I literally just talk to myself because in my mind, it's like I'm talking to someone. I'm genuinely just talking to myself, but I'm getting it out of my system. I'm getting it out of my body, which kind of helps, you know?
It definitely helps,
And
for
it might
sure.
not work for you, but
You'll find something.
yeah,
That'll
exactly.
work for you.
You know, let's bring it back to our topic. Like when you're fearing failure, if you want to think about the things that you're afraid of, talk to yourself about it. Maybe like record yourself saying, "What am I afraid of?" and then list
Yeah.
it. Just
You
go-
can't get past nothing without establishing what it is.
exactly.
All right, Nance, I got the most important question of the episode here. Well, not really. That was an exaggeration, but
Oh.
update on your favorite hype song or your go-to hype song?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm gonna pull out my phone for this one because
Yes, sir.
if you listen to this podcast and if you know me personally, you know I love music through and through. I really do love music. Hype song. Ooh, that's kind of been hard. Honestly, oh, no, I have one. Sorry.
That's all over the place here, fluctuating.
Brockhampton just released a new album. And my favorite song on that album is Bankroll. It's
with ASAP.
So ASAP Rocky and ASAP Ferg. It's so good.
I love ASAP.
Love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Maya, do you have a hype song currently?
Right now or lately, I've been feeling his name's Mad Season. I think he's from kind of my area, like where I'm from, and we have some mutual friends, and that's how I found out about him. But he just re-released his album called Goodbye Fall on all platforms. So you should definitely check it out. I think my two favorite songs, or good ones, like more upbeat ones, are Walls and Blueberries. You should definitely. I'll post them on the Instagram story, but you should definitely check them out because it's heat. So shout out Mad Season. Keep doing you.
Love it. We love to see it. We're going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much to everyone who's listened to this episode. We really appreciate it. We appreciate you. If there's anything personally that I want you to take away from it, again, I'm going to come back to COVID, but truthfully, be grateful for what you have. Recognize that not everyone is in the same situation as you, and this affects everyone differently. So hang in there. We're all getting through this together. You're not alone. And if anything, we're here for you too.
Yeah. Embrace the journey. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you for the support while we took our little break when we needed one, but big things are coming.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next week where we'll ask the questions that
nobody asks.
See ya.